Well, I have to plead guilty first. Helmut told me in early November that we need to write a section on peace, which I completely forgot, or I didn't even notice in the first place. So I kind of panicked, so I rushed it. I think I finished in a week and sent it off. So I didn't really quite remember what I wrote because it came out so quickly. Then I read it. I didn't say this to ask for your forgiveness. I read it last night very quickly. I actually feel some kind of a self-glorifying moment. I wrote something, although I didn't remember, kind of unfamiliar to me now. I thought it was impressive. There are some points I didn't remember that I wrote, but last night when I quickly went through, I thought, oh, okay, that's interesting. I wouldn't probably write that way if I write it now. But anyway, the article in its beginning it's about how people belong, and the belonging rely on some kind of emotion, especially loving. I think as the original article laid it out, I think there are two kinds of love. One is to restore the integrity of individuals, so that individuals feel safe. And in order to achieve that, love enable people to relate. So they either, like that you love other people, so you can relate to other people. There is sort of an imagined community, sort of mutual belonging. Or, as Jim Glass argued, that your community embrace you, hold you tight when you feel split, you feel kind of internal cleavages. So you suffer social regression. You cannot be in touch with the rest of society, and if you're threatened, anyone try to be in touch with you. And the community has such a strong psychological strength, with all the individual with integrity, sense of integrity, come together to hold you, allowing you to cry and kick like an infant, and then you learn to regroup yourself and absorb all this self-hatred and bad emotion about being existent within your own boundary. So one kind of loving is to restore the sense of boundary. So we are able either to hold other people or to love other people, and then we belong to each other. That's one kind of love. The other kind of love, I call this, the first kind of love, I call this universal love, that everyone is capable of loving everyone else simply because we are all same human beings. The other kind of love is more like a hierarchical love. That's benevolent love, or Confucian's imagination of the rulers' love of their people. In benevolent love, ordinary people, the population, which Confucian mentioned as either old peasants, old gardeners, women, or little men who cannot think clearly. Confucius didn't say why they cannot think clearly, but my subversive and critical reinterpretation of Confucianism, which meant to turn the popular image of Confucianism being conservative and being hierarchical around, turned it reversely, and by arguing that Confucian, when he said that the little men and women could not be taught, I think what he meant, that's my reinterpretation, if I understand Confucianism as a whole, my interpretation is that people in the subaltern positions, women and laborers and little men and peasants, they spend so much time on supplying the need of the ruling classes. So they don't have time, they don't have the energy to think and to learn. So these are not people that you can educate. And by implication, what Confucius actually said was that since you could not teach these people, so you better watch out. You could not predict how they're going to behave. So the only way to calm them down, to make them feel assured that their security, food, their family can continue in this during this hardship and their obligation to supply to the ruling class. The reason they can feel calm down was because you, as a gentleman, as the ruler, are able to calm them down. So you must behave in a certain way to ensure that all the people, all the little men and women who reproduce your leadership is able to feel safe, feel secured. So the obligation, the duty to calm people down lies on the shoulder of the rulers. And the rulers have to learn that they face an unpredictable population. So they must behave themselves, otherwise they create a demise of their own leadership or their own regime. I think that's what Confucius means. So it becomes very important for the rulers to show benevolent love. Practically, that would mean to lower the tax, lower the ratio of the crops created or produced by the peasants to be submitted to support the regime, lower their labor time so they could have more time accumulating their own crops. So basically, it's lower the burden of the common people, and that's I call it hierarchical love or benevolent love. With this benevolent love, the ruler can be the heart of the population, and the population can be the body of the ruler. They cannot be separated. If you separate them, neither can survive, right? And this, according to Confucius, is a metaphor of heaven and earth, creating all kinds of lives on earth. He didn't use the term earth, but anyway, I think that's what he meant. Human or non-human world, all the living things created by heaven or earth. And the greatest virtue of heaven and earth was to give lives. And I think this concerns for security and lives is quite common in both the Chinese classic and in the modernist narrative like Hobbes or Locke or Rousseau. This concern for human life, but then how people can protect themselves, whether they should assert their natural rights to resist and their natural rights to give consent for them to be ruled, or they should give up their self-interest in order to be part of entire group that have wise men on top to calm everyone, and everyone produce things to supply to the wise men to continue their ruling. These are different strategies, different culture, different history. So we have two different kinds of love. It's benevolent love and universal love. In terms of universal love, usually that is love based upon some kind of a universal humanhood defined by natural rights. With that kind of imagination of universal humanhood, if someone cannot live in the same protected natural rights, then the anxiety will be so high that everyone else share the same humanhood will lose their entitlement to natural rights because someone is dying, is being suppressed, being killed, and you could not do anything, or you refuse to do anything to rescue these people from their suffering. And then my natural rights would not be natural. That could be taken off by anyone else who's stronger than I am. So it becomes obligation to intervene on behalf of those people who suffer suppression. So intervention and universal love and this imagination of natural law and the natural rights become a bundle. It becomes something, a complex. It's together. So you have a tendency to intervene. And benevolent love, on the other hand, trying to make sure that all the people supposed to belong to the same group can trust each other and can protect each other. For that reason, everyone needs to engage some kind of a self-disciplinary, some kind of a self-restraining, some kind of self-sacrifice to ensure everyone else in the group that we are still together, because we all sacrifice in order to become part of the group. So there's two kinds of belonging through two different practices of love. That's the theoretical part of the original paper, and then apply this two categories of loving to the case of Hong Kong's return to China, and look at how different discourse of loving being utilized to mobilize support on different sides, either on the Chinese authority side, on the Chinese national side, or on the natural rights on the liberal side that was supported by all this former colonizer states. And so you have these two different kind of love. And simply by looking at the case of Hong Kong, that really doesn't give us much optimism about the connection between belonging and the peace. I don't know how to define peace. For me, either loving through holding, through intervention, or loving through benevolence are not necessarily peaceful. Oftentimes, it's not peaceful, right? And who would come to accept which particular way of belonging has to do with governmentality. So individuals really have to prepare pedagogically and culturally and practically in order to practice a particular kind of love. And you practice same kind of loving in order to belong to each other. If you practice different kind of loving, because you cannot accept your rights being tramped when you are requested to practice self-sacrifice, right? That would incur anxiety if you are prepared to practice a kind of love which opposite to the other way of practicing love. So they become these two ways of love and the two ways of belonging are themselves not very peaceful. It involves governmentality. It involves construction of selfhood, or collectivism. So it involves a lot of discipline, and to the result of well-prepared individuals or members of society are always self-disciplinary, which I wouldn't call peace. I wouldn't consider this being peaceful. So to connect peace with belonging, for me, it's a challenge. I see a lot of governmentality, self-disciplinary, in preparing members or individuals of society to continue belonging and to make sure others belonging to the same group also practice the same kind of self-disciplinary. So there is kind of a mutual disciplinary, self-discipline, and you would desire other people to have rights. Otherwise, you feel being deprived. You would desire other people belong to the same group and practice some kind of self-sacrifice. Otherwise, the group doesn't exist anymore. That said, I continue to ask what kind of condition of peace these two different practice would create for people. It appears that if they consider each other as strangers, because of two different modes of belonging, they will consider each other a stranger. How do they deal with strangers become very important, and strong implications for achieving or denouncing peace. Achieving peace can be a virtue, or denouncing peace can be a virtue, depending on the situation. And looking at the case of Hong Kong, it appears to me there are two kinds of violence. So I didn't talk about peace per se. I talk about violence as a way to convey peace negatively. I find there are two kinds of violence. One kind of violence is a violence toward others, toward strangers, in the sense that strangers violate universal rights. So for people who practice universal love, they feel obliged to intervene. So they can allow or even enable violence toward those people who violate universal rights. On the other hand, you have a kind of violence that targeting people belonging to your own group rather than the strangers. This is because people belonging to the same group are supposed to practice self-sacrifice. If they refuse to practice self-sacrifice and alternatively advocate or assert their rights, then the group could collapse. All the other members looking at the situation would feel that strangers emerge in their own group, and then they all become strangers to each other because they no longer know, they are no longer assured that other members in the group would refuse or would accept this kind of assertion for rights. So other people would feel very anxious. They will start disciplining those whom they regard as their members, and trying to make sure that they don't practice universal love, or they don't try to incur universal love of stranger group, and they would intervene, and that would destroy our group. So there are two kinds of violence. One is violence towards members or strangers outside the group, and the other violence is violence towards in-group. And I find universal love is such a love that actually encourage violence toward strangers. And hierarchical love or benevolent love accept violence toward its own members and find no excuse or justifications to move beyond the group and try to intervene in different places on behalf of those strangers and try to save them. This is not the style of benevolent love. Rather, the group of benevolent love is supposed to show benevolence to strangers and invite them to be part of the group, and let the strangers to decide whether they are willing to. If they're willing to, then of course the group expand, the influence of superiority expand. So I argue from the case of Hong Kong empirically that two kinds of violence emerged as a kind of an implication for negative peace. That's how I connect belonging to peace. First, by looking at belonging in itself is not a very peaceful process. It relies on governmentality, relies on self-silencing, self-disciplinary. And then I look at how, in the case of Hong Kong, these two different kinds of love look at each other as strangers and what's their approach to strangers, and come up with the idea of a violence against out-group strangers when you practice universal love, but violence against in-group members when you practice benevolent love. I'll stop here.